Good afternoon, I guess. I'd like to call the Finance, Audit, Tendering, and Administration Committee meeting of August 7th to order. Order of business, number one is called to order, so done. Number two, declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts today? None spoken about. Okay, thank you. Number three, approval of the agenda. You have a mover on that? Councillor Drong, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bernard, thank you. Approval of the previous draft minutes, July 3rd, 2024. Is there discussion, or I guess that'd be 5, business arising from the minutes, is there someone willing to approve the minutes? All right, Councillor Bernard, seconded by Mayor Brown, thank you. So business arising from the minutes. I know I just wanted to reference, unless there's anyone else, but I just wanted to reference, on the minutes, on the procurement bylaw, the minutes reflect Betty French gave a review of this report to the committee to know that the work on the bylaw is a priority. Dan and Betty continue to work on reviewing the processes of tenders, RFPs, and RFQs. In June, Betty and Dan met with the procurement team to review and update the tender standard operation procedures. So just like to ask Betty or Dan, either or whatever, both, if you care to chime in, just how that's going and what anything additional you can share with the committee.
Thanks, Chair. I guess what I can share is that we have been spending a lot of time on actual procurement. So digging into some of the files that we have and some of the challenges that we're having, just to kind of learn a little more about what's going on now and why that's not working, and trying to work through to figure out solutions to address some of the shortcomings in our current processes. So the jurisdictional work in terms of trying to identify a good procurement policy, we haven't advanced a whole lot on that, but we have been spending a lot of time on procurement generally and trying to work with staff on the processes that we're working through, department managers in terms of trying to help them with their procurement processes. We spent a bit of time with Frank this morning on some of the things he's trying to get done at Simmons, and so I'm pretty new to the city and procurement, as Betty's only got a couple of years as well. So we've lost a lot of our corporate history, and part of coming up with a good solution is understanding where we are now and what are some of our challenges. So to be transparent, a lot of our energy in the last month and a half or two has been on procurement and trying to address situations like we ran into with the transit depot on the procurement challenges. But that being said, it still is very much top of the agenda, and want to get something to committee hopefully in September in terms of substantive update with some suggestions in terms of direction that we want to go. Certainly, one of the things that has come into crystal clear vision is the fact that we are understaffed on the procurement side, that we don't have the resources that we need to effectively procure for a corporation that spends $180 million a year. We don't have anybody that's purely dedicated to procurement. And to compare that with University PEI or CBRM, there's probably a team of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 that are looking after that work. So that will unquestionably be part of the recommendation coming forward, is that we create some capacity to actually procure well. I think the staff that have been handling this work have worked really hard and diligently, but we don't have the procedures. We've lost a lot of corporate history on our procurement side in terms of staff knowledge and the perspective that they bring. Kudos to the staff that we have in place, that they've done such a good job to date. But in reality, we need some more horsepower in procurement. So I suspect that will be a big part of what we'll come forward with.
So, excuse me, just another, Dan, so just on that, you spoke about a timeline. At this point, sounds like, there's been you're in the trenches with it. Are you confident at this point, as best you can tell, about meeting the timelines? And the other question I have is, it was referenced about kind of going to tender to have someone kind of look at that piece for us. Is that something that's still in play throughout this process?
Yeah, so Chair, we have reached out to a number of professionals that are working in procurement to get some guidance and direction, and have spoken to some professionals in that end. We haven't engaged anybody. We didn't intend to go to tender on that. We thought we would try to identify where our weak spots were and then go out and try to hire folks that had a specialty in that area. If committee and council wanted to give us direction to, actually go out and hire a third party to build the procurement process, then we could certainly do that. But I think the direction at budget time and when we were discussing this was to try to use our internal resources as much as we could, and then go out and supplement that with professional capacity to deliver on some of the specific pieces.
Mayor Brown, you had a question?
So, Mr. Chair, back in 2020, the former controller, Steve Wedlock, produced a document on procurement, 22 pages. That would replace the 2 pages that we have currently for the policy. So we have a template to work from. The challenges of procurement, we've seen some of the issues with the procurement for emergency vehicles, EOI for the public transport, the transit shed. We know we have issues. We know we can't fix everything, but we need a framework. And I'm not really confident that we have an agenda, a timeline to come back to this council with a proposed procurement bylaw. I'm not confident. I don't think it's coming in September. We have something here. It's 22 pages. I have a copy of it. We can finesse that. I think Betty was working on that, and you come on board and said, no, well, we have to look at something else. And we have lots of challenges. We know those challenges in staff, but we have something that's already there. Let's use that. Because the 2-page document that we have now, it's wide open, and it can be interpreted in many different ways. We need something that guides our procurement going forth. So we've been talking about this, as Councillor Bernard and Councillor Duran knows, this is going on 4 years, 5 years. No reflection. Let me get it straight. No reflection on the current manager, the current director of finance, because you're still new on the block. It's been kicked down. This can has been kicked down the road for too long. And it's like some other issues that I have, like the summary offense ticketing bylaw. So this is what I'm concerned about. So I really want to make sure, Mr. Chair, that my confidence is not there that we're going to have something in September, unless we get information that states that, yes, we're definitely going to go ahead with this and have it ready for September.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, it's a good point, Your Worship. I actually have been spending some time on Stephen Wedlock's 2020 draft and comparing that to the most recent one that came from Finance and Betty, and then trying to reconcile those to some other templates that HRM and Halifax and UPIs to try to see where there are gaps and where we need to perhaps spend some time to develop additional pieces. But I I agree with you. The one that Stephen developed is a good piece of work, and also the one that Betty brought forward is also a good piece of work. So, in terms of the timeline in September, I'll be open with you. I'm a little frustrated that things haven't progressed more than they have. It seems that operational challenges have taken an awful lot more time than I would have expected. But I guess what I see is that we can come back in September with a relatively accurate roadmap in terms of how we're going to get to the final product, which is an implemented procurement policy. So we'll shoot to do that and try to be as detailed and provide as much information as we can.
Mr. Jenkins, listen, I understand what you're saying, but you've listed a number of challenges, staff-wise, procurement that we're going through currently. Now we're looking at maybe presenting a timeline in September. Look, the timeline is very obvious. Let's get something. As the Irving said it best, they say it best, get it done. So, if we need to go with extra resources, which was suggested by us, let's go out to tender, get someone to come in to help with this. Let's do that. Because we're just, again, we're rolling and rolling and rolling. It's going to come to a point where some of the councillors are going to say, when are we going to see something?
And not to stay in the weeds, but just for Danny, roughly, I mean, I'm hearing, or the committee's hearing, staffing, like, just roughly, quickly, like, would it take 2 people? Like you talk about staffing up, like, any idea numbers, what it would take to, in terms of staff, additional staff? We talking 1, 2, 6?
Well, Chair, some other comparable public sector bodies would be, for the business we do, they'd be somewhere between 4, 7, 8 staff, which is probably a realistic expectation here. Part of the uniqueness of Charlottetown is that our procurement process is, a lot of it happens out in the departments. So you have Parks and Recreation doing their specs and hiring engineers to do building design and write tender documents. And similarly, you have Public Works, doing their own thing, and IT's doing their own thing. In most organizations, the vast majority of that work is done centrally. So there's a uniform process in place. We have a bit of a uniform procedure in place, but it's really kind of taking what the departments send in to Connie and Sabakoon and basically, converting that into a document to get posted. Whereas in most other organizations, that procurement, the start to finish in terms of the hiring consultants to do design, conceptual design, and the tender document, most of that work is contained within a procurement office, and we don't really have a procurement office. It's kind of dispersed out.
So, excuse me, so, anyway, as you talk about this, is it maybe then conceivable, to the mayor's point, and I think the committee's point, on this procurement bylaws, we've been beating it for a while now. Perhaps it's maybe it's got to be like in September to think you're going to have a full robust where you kind of want to have it planned. Maybe it's not. Looks like it's not a reality. So, do we? Is it maybe it's a phase thing of some kind? I don't know how many phases you'd need, but I don't know. Just what's your thought on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think given what knowledge I've gained since getting started and understanding some of the challenges that the city has on procurement, I'd be much more supportive now of bringing someone outside in terms of actually doing the hard work to develop the structure and the processes that would be appropriate for a corporation of our size. It's a big piece of work, there's no question. And, as much as I was optimistic that we could kind of rob a good policy from somebody else, the operational challenges, Betty's run off her feet with getting bills paid and managing project payments and on and on and on. And, it's an important piece of work and something that, today I would be more supportive of going out and getting some hired guns to take it on, as a standalone project. I guess I'd probably like to, defer that discussion until September, when my hope is that August is going to provide a little more runway to tackle this problem than July and June did. But I think to be able to present to committee and council, where we are, where I see the challenges, where what a reasonable time frame might be, and even to have some have the opportunity to get some input from those folks that I've spoken to in terms of what they think would be a realistic go forward plan. I think would be helpful rather than jumping into it now.
Thank you, Dan. And Tamara, trust you got good notes on that. And Dan, and Betty, as I said, a number of meetings back, I will continue to circle back to this as chair, because it's something that we do have to get done. It sounds like it's a big task, but we have to get there. Thank you. I guess to deal with that, so that was 5, business arising from the minutes. Was there anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, 6B. 6B is page 3. I brought this up with the manager of finance on the Eastlink budget. And if we look at our budget book, or our financial plan, it says grant to CCMI. The budget was for 23-24 million, 1 million, but the forecast was 1.6. But numbers I have are not saying it was 1.6. It was 1,023,000. Do we know where that one, like the forecast to me is the actual, correct, Betty? Is that right, Mr. Chair? Correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to your worship. This is a piece that I still have on my list to do a deep dive into. So I haven't had a chance to look into that in detail yet. So
Right.
I will, and I'll get back to you.
Well, again, the reason I bring that up, because this, again, skews the numbers, just like we found in the water and wastewater budget. One was a deficit where it should have been a surplus. One was a surplus, one was a deficit. It's just that this is a financial plan, budget document that, that goes out to the public. So I'd really like to know, what does that represent? Because it shouldn't include capital. Capital would be under a separate category under a capital budget. This is the operational budget. So really want to find out what's going on there. Thank you.
All right. So we'll move to 6A to H, I guess. Discussions, reports. 6A, electric vehicle EV charger update, and we have Nick Walker here from as energy management engineer. So Nick, can you kind of take us through your report and the recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. This report is about the electric vehicle charging stations that the city owns. There's 10 in the city, 10 locations. Of those 10, it equals 19 charging ports. So this report has already gone to the Environment and Sustainability Committee, but I've taken it to the Finance Committee since it'll requires some changes to the fees bylaw and a resolution by council. The report, just some background on the EV charger stations. The table on page 2 shows the 10 locations, and you can see the relative usage of the stations. And from that, you can see the downtown locations are by far the highest usage ones, with the one in front of the library being the highest used station in the city. Based on the current pricing, we get about the revenue from these stations is about $15,400 a year, and the cost of electricity is about $10,700 per year. So it is profitable based on the current pricing. Although the cost of electricity is about $1.50 per hour. The current cost for the charging stations is about $3 an hour across the board, with 3 of the stations going up to $4 an hour during the peak times, just basically business hours during the weekdays. The recommendation is to change some of these prices, mostly decrease the prices to better align with the cost of electricity and the cost of the parking. So there's 3 different situations, 3 different types of locations that the chargers are located in. There's ones that took the place of a metered parking space. So there's 3 of those. There's 4 in unmetered spots, so like the community centers and the arenas. So there's 4 of those locations. And there's 3 in parking facilities, so Pownell, Fitzroy, and the CADC parking lot downtown on the waterfront. So just as an example, in the metered spaces, the cost covers the cost of the meter plus the cost of electricity. But in the unmetered spaces, it's still $3 an hour, but beforehand there was no cost to park there. So it's really twice the cost of what we're paying for the electricity. And then in the parking facilities, people are already paying to park there, and with the addition of the cost of the EV charger on top of that. So for those reasons, there's been very little uptake in the unmetered spots in the parking facilities. You can see that from the table that was included. So with the reduction in price, the intention is to encourage more usage of those locations, just make it a bit more on par with other charging stations in the city. So the table there on page 2 shows the proposed prices. So for the metered spots, it would be $3 an hour during the peak times, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and then drops to $2 an hour in the evenings and weekends. For the unmetered spots, it would be $1 an hour for the first hour, and then going up to $2 an hour after that. And that $1 an hour is really basically an incentive for people to use the arenas and the community centers, gets them out using the stations and using the facilities. And then for the parking facilities, it would be $2 an hour for the first 3 hours, and then up to $4 an hour after that. Again, sort of encourage people to use those chargers in those locations, but not have them stay all day long. So the recommendation is to change the fees bylaw to reflect those changes. Thank you.
Thank you for your report, Nick. Questions, Councillor Drown?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, how long does it take to charge a car? Like for, like if they do an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours?
Level 2 chargers
That's all we have, level 2.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. It depends on the vehicle. If you're just downtown looking for a quick charge, it might be half an hour to an hour with our stations. If you're trying to charge your vehicle is empty and charging the full amount, then it could be a number of hours, could be up to 10 or 12 hours. But based on the information that we have from ChargePoint, which is the company that the chargers are with, the average is about 2 to 3 hours that people are staying at the charging locations that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Mayor Brown?
Yeah, Nick, appreciate what you're doing. Look, I use the recharging stations when I'm driving the city vehicle. You know, I'm going, representing the city on different functions, and I want to get a little juice up. I always plug in for about an hour or 2 hours. But they're not level 3. The level 3 that we do have is out at, there's one out at Canadian Tire. I think there are 4 ports. But you don't see too many people out there because it's like out in the middle of the field. Are we looking at level 3?
Through you, Chair. So currently, we're not looking at level 3. The cost is much more expensive to install those. It goes for a level 2 charger. It's in the couple of $1,000 range. For a level 3, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, and there's certain situations where those work best. If you're just downtown and spending a few hours, then the level 2 is kind of the ones that make the most sense. The level 3 ones are more highway, and you're stopping quickly and continuing on your journey kind of thing. So for now, the level 2 is what we're focusing on.
So is the Tesla charging station out there at North River Mercantile, I call it Causeway, are they level 3?
Yeah, I think those are Tesla superchargers, and they would be considered a level 3.
And so Urban Energy, they have a number of locations around the Maritimes, down along the northeastern seaboard. They're also level 3, which I think you can get a good charge in 20 minutes.
Yeah, the level 3s, they're able to just send a lot more electricity to the vehicle. So yeah, again, depending on the vehicle, but it's more half an hour to an hour kind of is what you need for those.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just curious, so like on level 2s, where in terms of usage, like I said, it takes a little longer, 2-3 hours potentially, I guess, for a full charge. But I guess are there lots of examples where people, they're not doing maybe a full charge in a level 2, they're getting enough to, I guess, get them to where they think they got to get to next, I guess. Is that part of what happens?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Chair. With people that, residents of Charlottetown that have electric vehicles, they're mostly going to be charging at home. So a lot of the usage is likely, tourist related, and people coming in, they're stopping for a few hours to do some shopping and that sort of thing and going on their way. There's probably not too many people that are stopping and fully charging their vehicle for many hours, although it does happen.
Okay. Mayor Brown, do you have anything else?
Move.
Get your light on? Okay.
Move it.
Moved by Mayor Brown. Is anybody prepared to second that?
Yeah, oh, well, yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Bernard. All those in favor? All right, 3-0, thank you. 6B, street resurfacing, new funding request. Riley Twill's not here, Scott Adams is. I trust he'll be speaking to this. Basically, spirit of which is looking at committing or trying to find another $1 million for paving in this budget year for the city. So, Scott, do you want to get started, please?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, as in the report says, a request came through our committee to increase this year's street resurfacing budget by an additional $1 million. As of right now, in our budget, I wasn't confident that we were able to reallocate $1 million in our existing budget, just because we still have a lot of work underway, and still some work to be tendered that we anticipate getting off the ground earlier this fall. So as such, that's why this report is here, asking for an additional $1 million for street resurfacing for this upcoming year, so that we can proceed with adding more street resurfacing before the end of October, 1st November.
All right, plenty, Councillor Bernard, you have your light on, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's good to try and keep it at around 4 million every year so we can get the streets all caught up. I think we were told a number of years ago that we need at least 4 million to have the streets paved at an appropriate time when their life expectancy runs out. I'm just wondering, and maybe Eleanor could answer this, or Betty, sorry. It talks about here farther down when we talk about the gas tax or the Canadian Community Building Fund. Betty, it talks about overextended our gas tax by 2.7 million, I think it was. 2.4 million. And I think I read were you hoping to capture that in the 25-26 allocation to get back on track, or does this $1 million, does it actually put any money into more paving, or does it help pay down the 2.4 that were over allocated? That would be my question.
Thank you, Councillor Bernard. I'll defer that to Manager Betty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Bernard. My understanding is it's not to do with the CCBF funding. This would be additional funding over and above the CCBF funding.
Okay, so then so here it is here, subsequent, okay. So that over allocation, the 2.4 million, that would impact next year's capital budget then? It would have to at some point.
It may be covered by this year's budget. It may come out of next year's CCBF funding. It depends on how much of the CCBF funded projects end up being completed this year. It's not uncommon, if I look at the history, that we would, I believe even in 23-24, we had allocated several $1 million more than we actually spent. I think we'd in the capital budget, we had $8 million budgeted to be funded by CCBF funding, and the final tally was less than 3.7, I believe. So it depends on the timing of the projects and what it ends up being finished.
Okay, so in other words, projects that were allocated but never got done, so the money never gets spent. That's what you're saying.
That's
right?
correct. That's
Okay.
correct. So if that trend is the same this year, we may not need all the money, but I also know the managers are working very hard to get all the projects finished. I know one of them, for instance, is the Victoria Park shoreline.
Yeah.
That $1
been
million
waiting for years,
has been
yeah.
there for, I'm not sure, but 2 or 3 at least years, but it's going out to tender very soon, and the expectation is to have it finished by the end of the year. So, but that project was in the capital budget the previous year and the previous year. So it all depends on just how things get caught up.
Yeah, so, and I assume that if we have a project on the books, even if it doesn't get done this year, we'll be looking to do it the following year. So that still would impact that 2.4 million. So the next year, because I understand, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember when we talked about the allocations coming, I think this year, since we had a new municipality, a new,
Three Rivers. Yeah.
it was going to be 2.9 million. I think it was dropping down a bit from 3.3 to.
Yeah, because there was more municipal population because of the annexations of Three
Right,
Rivers
right,
and
the annexation, yeah.
West River as well.
Yeah.
It reduces our share of that bucket of money because it's distributed by per person in a municipality. Just wanted to kind of provide a little bit of context to why we're 2.4 short, and I think really what it boils down to is when we did the estimate back in when we were doing capital budgets, we had forecast our capital spending for that fiscal year was going to be X. But we had several $1 million of invoices come in after the budget process that we didn't really anticipate or factor in. So we've used more of the allocation than we expected to cover off some of those funding. We still had a balance to carry forward, but even with the balance carried forward and the allocation for the fiscal year we're in now, 24-25, it still falls short from what we budgeted to receive. So in the end, because we spent more on capital projects last year and we have less to carry over, it's going to mean that we have less CCBF to apply to future projects because our annual allocation is fixed because of the population and the per capita entitlement that we get to that. So, it will, but those funds have been deployed into the projects that we've been able to complete. And long and short of it is we completed more than we thought we were going to at budget time. So just a little bit of.
No, that's okay. I guess my concern is when we do our budget next year, we're going to be, according to this, we'll be down 2.4 million. So I assume that has to be, that's an allocation. So our new allocation, I think this year was 2.9 million. 2.4 of it's already spent. So we're only going to have 500,000 in CCBF in 25, 26.
Yeah, I think we're
Which
about.
will then impact probably our paving budget.
Yeah, it will undoubtedly impact our budget because it's just not available for future use. But I think our annual allocation, Betty's budget estimate at this time is about 3.6 million, a little higher than the 2.9. So we did get a bit of a bump.
So is that since we last looked at the allocations over the number of years when we had our meeting with the CCBF people? Because I thought that allocation, they had made it clear that it was going to be 2.9.
Mr.
We
Chair,
had them
just a
down.
point of order. Councillor,
Mayor
there is a section there that 6F, we're going to be speaking about the Canada Community Building Fund on our agenda. Are you trying to tie this
Okay,
in?
okay.
Like I just want to.
Yep, yep,
Is that
okay.
all right? Could I just follow up what you're saying there?
Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, through to you to the chief engineer. I'm looking at the budget for 23-24. And, no, I just want to go over this first because, again, this is always a work in play. So, Scott, last year you budgeted 27,548,000 for 23-24. Now, if I look at the financial plan for this year, I can't see, unless Betty, there's a column for the year before and what we spent. I can't see it, so I'm just going on. What did you spend of that budget, Scott? Did you spend 50%, 80%? Because, Scott, while you're working that out, this year your budget, your capital budget is for 23,848,000. So I know historically, we've never spent all the budget. So to say that, we have to add $1 million, that's not, like, are we adding $1 million on top of the 23 that you're going to spend? Like, did you spend all the money last year? Will you spend all the money this year?
Chair, through to his worship. So great question. So at the end of the day, will there be $1 million left in the pot? There's a good chance for sure. It might be, a few thousand from here to here, and, from different accounts to make up that $1 million. The reason why we thought it should come to finance, is to ensure that this committee, in the end of the day, if we're short a little bit of money, that there is the approval to issue that tender ahead of time, just to ensure everyone is aware that there could be a small shortfall. In terms of what you're referring to, so a lot of the big chunk of the money, we got about $16 million or right around that for Eastern Gateway, which will be spent over the next few weeks. Our paving program currently is at 4 million. All that's slated to be spent this year. So, we are right there is $20 million amongst 3 contracts alone, and there's still other contracts that we have out there that they're working on. So I'm fairly confident saying this would be one of the years that we spend our, the biggest percentage of our capital budget. Do I think we'll hit 100%? No, but it's going to be closer than I'm ever seeing here, just because we've done a lot of legwork to get ready for the year well in advance of this year. So really, the concern was just in the event that we didn't have the $1 million, we still wanted to have the committees, just like we always do when we're asking for money. The committee here at Finance needs to kind of give the go-ahead to move with the council to approve this work, and so that's why we're here.
So, Mr. Chair, again, through you to the chief engineer or Betty or Mr. Jenkins. Okay, can I get the forecast for the 23-24 for the capital, what we spent? Because it's not in my budget, the financial plan, unless, if you can point me to where it is, I'd like to see it. Betty, Mr. Chair, to Betty, is that all right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to your worship. I have the numbers here for the capital budget in total.
Yeah.
Not just for public works. So for city, the total capital budget, now this includes partner funding, so the total amount that was authorized to be spent on capital projects for 23-24 was 109 million.
Right.
At budget time, we were estimating, based on the information from the departments, that we would spend 47 million
47.
of that 109 million. And then the actual final numbers were 38.8 million. But traditionally, we had been budgeting perhaps for multi-year projects where we weren't anticipating spending the whole thing in that year anyway. In the 24-25 budget, we changed that focus to some extent to try to be budgeting for what we actually intended to spend. So based on that, the budget that Scott has is what he's intending to spend. So if the idea is now that we're going to spend $1 million more, probably he wouldn't have it in his budget unless he were specifically to delay a particular project.
So just, again, Mr. Chair, looking at engineering for last year, this is right under street resurfacing, we budgeted 500,000. This year, we budgeted $1 million. So that's a lot of money for engineering, but again, as Scott mentioned, our chief engineer, that we are doing the big dig down there at the Eastern Gateway waterfront project. And Betty, just one other thing, under Parks and Recreation, that capital budget for land improvement, Victoria Park, that's not under Parks, that's not under Public Works, that's under Parks and Recreation. So we're not taking from that budget. That's separate budget item. So, Mr. Chair, that's why I'm in favor of, going with actually, if you look at what we spent so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, so street resurfacing package A was 1.6 million. Package B was 1.6 million, that's 3.2 million. We budgeted 3.9, $4 million. So, there's a little bit of wiggle room there yet, okay? So I'm looking for a package C. That's what I'm asking for. And it may be $1 million minimum, but we need it. The streets around the city are just in deplorable condition, guys. We're not keeping up with what's going on. Water and wastewater is doing a great job in keeping up on their infrastructure below grade, but what's above grade? You can talk to Councillor Tron, you can talk to any councillor. It's deplorable. So I'm in favor of package C with at least, $1 million. Get it out as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Councilor Bernard?
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree, and I think that's why, like during budget discussions, I think, and it was brought to our attention that, to try and keep streets paved and in good shape, we'd have to maintain the $4 million at least capital budget. Yeah, I'll be in favor of moving ahead too. I think what Scott's saying makes sense. I don't think we can start cutting certain things out of a budget now to say, well, we're going to get $1 million. I think we have to have that. At the end of the year, if there's a couple million left over in Public Works, great. You kind of get that money back. But I think there has to be $1 million set aside if we're going to increase the budget for paving. So I would be, I would move it.
What's that?
I would move it.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Yeah, resolution's on the floor. So package A was 1.6, package B was 1.5. So how many kilometers would that be, just offhand there, Chief Engineer? 5? Yeah. Maybe 5, maybe 8? 14, okay. So could we look at the same for package C, 14 kilometers? Anyways, think about it.
Your chair through the worship, so we'll look at what $1 million gets us. And there's a lot of factors that go into how far that dollar will go. And one of the biggest things is how wide the street is. Some residential streets are 6.5 meters, and we have some that are 9 meters. So some need to be fully pulverized, so that means we're gonna pulverize, put base and seal, so 2 lists of asphalt. Sometimes we can mill and pave. So we'll look at that and see how far we can stretch that dollar for approximately $1 million.
So just one more question. So whenever we redo a street, you're pulverizing and you're replacing the curb, is there a separate budget for the curb or does that come out of that also?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Bernard. That's correct. So typically, any work that's done outside of a sidewalk work or curb and gutter work that needs to be repaired. One thing we'll look at is the extent of that. So just because timing of year, there may be a road that does need to be paved this year, but there's extensive work that needs to be done before we pave it, and that can be anything from water and sewer having to replace a valve, or a catch basin work, or 100 meters of sidewalk that our crews just don't have time or the capacity to finish this year. We would delay that for another year to plan. So that's why most of you folks, you'll see a report. We start planning in the fall for the following year because we need to be able to ensure that we have the capacity to do those sidewalk repairs and curb and gutter repairs, as well as water and sewer work ahead of time. So what we just, in the essence of time, because we're really tight on time, timelines to get this out and tendered, we're going to look at, obviously, worst first, look at the roads that fall under that list. Might be 1 or 2 that we might have to delay till next year just because there's just too much work to be done before it makes sense to pave it.
Yeah, thank you, councillors and Manager Scott. Yeah, just my own thoughts on the request. I get it. I know the streets are in bad shape. You could probably put all the capital budget into streets and still wouldn't be enough. But just as it relates to the request, I was kind of more in support of leaving the budget the way it was. The 24-25 budget was set. I was hoping we'd stay on task with that, and then if 25-26. We'd look at the additional allocation, potentially then. But I'm hearing from the committee, otherwise. So anyway, we'll obviously it'll go to council and can be discussed and voted on there. I guess is kind of where we're at. And if I understand what we're talking about in terms of this current budget, there's the possibility that we won't have a full spend on our capital budget 24-25, and this million we're talking about could be allocated to the additional street requests. So anyway, that's I think that probably concludes discussion on 6B, unless there's anything else. All right, thank you. Going to 6C, Port Charlottetown Community Grant in lieu of taxes. This is basically the $29K request that's been part of the budgeting process, which is very similar, I guess, to what we do for the the airport authority. Different numbers for sure, but anyway, on this, I know it was sent back, and personally, I've given it more thought and had some deliberation. I'm certainly in support of it, but Betty, do you anything further to add to that? Okay. No other comments?
I'll move it.
Mayor, okay, go ahead. So moved, any seconder? Seconder, Councillor Bernard. All those in favor? All right. Any opposed? 2-1. All right, thank you. 6D, City of Charlottetown Tax Incentive Strategy Funding Request. Betty, this, economic development piece, and again, I guess there's, in the report, as it states, I guess there's a piece here that was missed in terms of what should have been allocated and included, I guess, in our 24-25 budget, but Betty will take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there was two new tax incentive strategy agreements that were being finalized at the end of March, and they went to the Economic Development Committee at the end of March and through to Council, and there was a Council resolution at the April meeting to approve these two agreements. The first year of the Arts Hotel agreement is $16,349, and the Bio Alliance Incubator, the first year is $53,735. These were known about at budget time, and for whatever reason, they were not actually included in the budget this year, and so this is a request to add them to our budget and to reallocate the funding from the extraordinary item reserve. And these are each 5-year agreements, so if you were to scroll down to the copy of the report from the Economic Development Committee, it shows there the 5 years, that's a declining balance. So the total for the Arts Hotel is $55 million, the total for the CADC Bio Alliance Incubator is $179,000. So it is a 5-year commitment, but we're asking for the additional funding of, the amount is in there, 70.
Yeah, the Arts Hotel
Some
total is
thousand.
54,000. I thought you said million.
55 million.
I just want to clear that. clear that.
50, well, I think I was saying 55 million, I'm saying 55,000, my apologies.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still thinking capital budget. Those decimal places get you all the time. Yes, so 55,000, thank you very much. So we're asking for funding here of $70,085.64.
Thank you for that, Betty. Councillor Drong.
Thank you. Thank you for the information here, Betty. How come it's coming here now? Like if all this was completed in 2021 or for both places? Like I was under the understanding that, when we passed this in April, that, this was something new that they were going to do and, they've applied for it. But this is 4 or 5 years ago. How come it's coming here now? Can you explain that?
Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Drawn. I think the easiest way to explain it is that it was a miscommunication. The director responsible for economic development and I had a conversation before budget was in process. Our chat about that at that time was that there was enough in the budget to cover off this next 12 months commitment to those two agreements. There was a request from the Bio Alliance to extend their tax incentive from 5 years to 10 years, and that was something that was being discussed. So it hadn't actually been brought to committee for approval or council, but we did fully understand that it was we were kind of on the hook for those 5 years for both of those properties, but it didn't get approval at committee level. But we really had knowledge that 70,000 was a commitment that we had to honor this fiscal year. It just didn't get factored into the budget because I think the people that were putting together the departmental budget we're thinking we don't have to put it in because it hasn't been approved yet, but really it was a known expenditure that should probably have been factored in there. But again, those are things that we're trying to streamline our processes and engage managers in the budget process, and we're trying to have everybody understand their role and expectations. And another situation, we've never really included an operational budget item for our hosting fees, but they come up every year. We continue to pay hosting fees to provide incentives, but we've never included that in our budget. We've always come back to council and said, we'd like to spend X thousands of dollars to host the Soho event, but we have no budget for it. So it's been kind of thrown back to finance to say, can we find budget for it? Really, we should, on an annual basis, be coming up with a number, whether it's 200,000, 300,000. This is our hosting budget, and then dev management and staff figure out how best to use that. Right now, we don't have anything in the budget, so that's another thing that I've asked Mike and Wayne to come back, to council, so we can get that into the budget, because it is a regular recurring expense that we expect. But there's been different expectations depending on department and managers, and now we've got a new finance director, which adds a whole new dimension. So I've got different expectations as well. But we're trying to bring as much consistency as we can to the next budget process, so that we don't run into these situations.
Just to follow up, if it's okay, John?
Councillor Drown?
Yeah, and I understand the, the incentive behind this, but what I'm asking is, okay, if they came to do the Arts Hotel in 20 or 21, we're here now going on a 5-year, like, have they been paying full price for the last couple of years and we missed it, or where are we 3 years in, or what? I just can't understand. If I was going to build a hotel and I'd apply for the tax incentive program, I would want it to start right away. So why is it here now?
A good question to the chair, to Councillor Ron. So this was the property developer, in this case, Dine, coming to us looking to have the incentive reimbursed. So they had applied back in the day. It was COVID times, and it just got missed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from their perspective.
No money?
Yeah.
Okay. So they applied, and now, through all the time, they still never received anything, so they just want to start it now?
That's right.
Yeah, so we're catching up on our commitment from
Okay.
2020.
And Mr. Chair, if I could also add, Councillor Drawn, if you go to page 16, is it, where it shows the payout, none of that has been reimbursed yet. And as for CADC and the bio incubator, I believe they were looking for 10 years. And we had to change the policy, because the old policy for tax incentive excluded West Royalty Industrial Park operations, and more specifically CADC. So we amended that. So this year one will start 24, 25, correct? If it passes, yeah, not 2021. That's a good, that's 180,000 over 5 years that they don't have to pay taxes, and for the hotel, 55. So it's an investment in our infrastructure and our tourism industry. I move it.
I understand, just for clarification, if
Councillor Drown?
will this open it up for anybody else?
Yeah, good question, Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
So the policy is quite clear that the request has to come in before construction commences. So there had to be documented evidence of a request and so on. So and the idea behind that is that it's an incentive to do something as opposed to get paid for something you've already done.
Okay, thank you. I'm great, that's good.
We all good, thanks, Dan. We all good in 6D, okay? 6E, insurance renewal. Betty, Yeah, it's just, yeah, more numbers. Anyway, go ahead, Betty, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, our insurance actually renews on the 1st of July, and we approved it at the August committee and council meeting last year. We were hoping to do it earlier this year. We actually started our process earlier, but clearly we need to start even earlier still. Our insurance number is getting big. It's over $1 million now, but that is because of some standard insurance increases, which are a little bit more than what we had an estimate of at budget time. I think they told us it would, the general amount for cost of living, they estimated at budget time would be between 6 and 8%, and it came in at 8%. Plus, we have a couple of new properties, the Brackley Road property. I think we had 6 months the previous year. We have a full year this year. There's a Mount Edward property. So these numbers do keep increasing. We've given a more detailed breakdown of the types of coverage and some additional background from our insurance broker as to reasons for the increase. So yes, there is a lot of information in there, but since the increase was significant, and also because we were tighter in the budget this year, so the amount is actually a little bit over what we had budgeted. There's an over budget amount of about $55,000. I've also provided some claims experience in there. The insurance broker is suggesting that's another reason for the high increase, is because we have on the high side as far as claims go. So that's just to give you some background there. Under the financial implications piece, it shows you the actual effect on the current year's budget. We have 3 months at the 23-24 rates, and then 9 months at the 24-25 rates, which is why that doesn't tie in completely with what the premium is. So the overall budget overage is $54,240, which we are proposing be funded by an allocation from the extraordinary expenses, reserve. That would still leave $1.2 million in that reserve.
Yeah, Betty, just on the committee report details, June 21, the city awarded the contract. Just want to understand, awarded the contract for city and utility insurance needs for July 21, June 22, with the option to renew for 5 years to Cook Insurance. So are we, with our current arrangement, are we obligated, tied into Cook's for insurance for a 5-year period, or?
Mr. Chair, that is my understanding, but it is something that I will double check, because the wording of the information I was given, it is somewhat unusual. It makes it sound like it's 1 year and then option to renew. And again, is it renewing year by year? And to be honest, I'm not 100% clear on that, so I'll double check and get back to you.
Yeah, if we could, have that clarity would be good. I mean, in terms of shopping or taking a second look, I guess it's just good to understand the context of our current obligation. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Mayor Brown?
is Betty, through the chair to Betty, general liability, just on page 18. So general liability is like someone falls on our property and gets hurt. Property, so is that like fire insurance? I'm just trying to find out, like, I know the definitions are below there, but I'm just 1 second. So property, if I go down, if I look at property. So increase from 197 to 220. That's 11.8% increase. So is that fire, what's just, can you define that? Like what? That means if Hurricane Fiona 2.0 comes along and blows off a roof,
I believe that's covered under property.
okay. So I asked that, and I want to just also go to automobile insurance. It's 204,000. What's our deductibility on that? Is it 25,000? So anything up to 25,000, we pay out of pocket, correct? Would that be the same for the property?
So for the property insurance, it's a $10,000 deductible.
Okay.
For the general liability, it's a $25,000 deductible. And I would have to check on auto. See, they gave us a summary of the claims, and it was very clear, here's the total incurred, here's the deductible, and here's the net incurred. And I have asked for the additional information for auto because they only gave us the total. There was nothing on there about the deductible. Now, if I went further into the attachments, it probably would give us that.
Again, it's the deductibility. I know, for example, some companies just go with self-insurance. And I'm not saying that, I'm not suggesting that. And then cyber insurance, very important because of, as you know, breaking that firewall. Council accident, what's a council accident? That's just like someone throws a pie at me, or? Can you? You can get back to me on that.
Yes, I cannot claim to be an insurance expert,
no.
and I rely on our
And I was
broker quite
looking through
a
it.
lot for what they give us. So if we have particular questions, I tend to go back to them. But that's a good question, is to have
if you
definitions of all these things.
Yeah, thank you.
Just curious too, Betty, if you know, so this is the insurance piece for the city, the various components. Do they offer, do they go as deep as offering a staff piece, enticements for if you're a city employee and you do business with Cook's Insurance, they offer any kind of enticements that way, to your knowledge?
I am not aware of them offering special rates to staff.
Okay, are we good on the general insurance or insurance renewal? Don't see any lights. Okay, thank you. 6F, Canada Community Building Fund, we've had a bit of a go at this, but we'll try and close the loop on it if there's any additional questions.
I think the mayor, did you ask her for a deductible for automobile for the city?
She said it's 25,000.
Okay.
Just for clarification, not for automobile, it's 25,000 for the general liability.
General liability.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's 2,500 for automobile insurance
It says right there, what page?
for all perils.
So again,
32?
on 6F, on the Canada Community Building Fund, I know, thank Councillor Bernard for kind of, digging into this a little bit for us and I think it's a great, an important piece to have up to speed. There's a lot of money crosses the table on the on the budget side in these projects. So if this is something that we can have as a regular kind of maybe reporting piece, CCF or is it CCBF piece in our reporting would be probably a nice thing once you get it fully, reconciled. Would be a nice piece of information to have to the committee and council, if that's easy, Betty. Councillor Bernard.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for redoing this, Betty, and listing all the projects. That makes sense to me. Because the one I think that stands out for me is the $3.7 million that we would have paid for St. Peter's Belvedere Roundabout. I didn't know we paid that much. I think that was a $5.5 million project. Guess we that's why I was going to ask Scott when he was here, because I kind of wondered where the other funding came from. We spent almost $4 million on that. Anyway, So it goes back to the allocation coming in at 3.6 million. So that's an up-to-date number? Because I think when we met with CCBF, that's where we got the information that it would be going down because of the annexation of Three Rivers. That was supposed to be, at least at that time, they were telling us 2.9 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Councillor Bernard. I'm getting my number from an email from Curtis Lumsden back in March, towards the end of March, of 2.605719. He's given us an allocation for each year for the next 5 years. And just while we've been talking here, I went back to see if there was an update to that. Are you aware of any change to that? So as far as we know, that's our number.
Okay, no, that's good, because that was the number at first. And then when we met them on screen, that's where it changed. So I hope he's not giving an all number, but anyway, we'll find out through time.
Chair,
Go ahead, Dan.
through the chair to Councillor Bernard. So our allocation for 23-24 was 3.676 million. And then our allocation for this coming year, or the year we're in, was 3.6. So it actually did go down from last year, but it wasn't that 2.9 number. It was close to the 3.6, just a little bit lower than what we got last year.
Yeah, no, that's good, because that's another 600,000 from what he told us a few months ago.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you.
Are we, Mayor Brown, you got your light on?
No, good to go.
Yeah, you want the light off then? Okay. We're good then, 6F, 6G, tenders, RFPs, RFQs. Betty, I think pretty self-explanatory unless there's questions from the committee members. Not seeing any lights, so we're good on that. Thank you, Betty, and that takes us to 6H, monthly financial report, which is 3 months as of June. Again, I guess, the numbers speak for themselves. We're, I guess, a third of the way in. Nothing, Betty, that our remittances from the province are in sync, and we're not getting any overpayments or underpayments, or best you know. All right, unless there's, I'm not seeing any lights on the monthly financial report, so
No, I just wanted to ask,
go ahead, Mayor Brown.
so Betty, we see red all over. Again, I think it has to be put in perspective, right? If you look at what we're getting from the provinces on the taxes, our original budget is 46 million. So funds available, is that what we've collected so far? 35 million? I'm just asking. Through the chair to Betty. Top line.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to your worship.
Yeah.
It's the current year-to-date column that you're looking at. So the funds available is the original budget number minus the current year-to-date, gives you what's left coming. And actually, the funds available comment really relates more to expenses.
So
That lets folks
right,
know.
we've only
Yeah,
received-
so we've had the 11 million come in so far, which would be a quarter of the total. So it's right on track.
That's why it looks like it's bleeding there when it goes city revenue less expenditures. Yeah. So it just.
So I keep meaning to go back.
to put that in
and,
perspective,
and
right,
make
Betty?
everything black so there's nothing red to make people worried.
Well, this looks like water and wastewater budget. Always in the red. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Thank the committee. Not seeing any more. Well, no. Okay, got to follow the numbers. 7, introduction to new business. Councilor Bernard.
I just out of curiosity, I'm just wondering on the budget, in the interest line, where we're down in 53,000 in interest. Trying to understand why that would be if interest rates were higher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Bernard. We're actually ahead by 52,000. So the budget is 50,000, and we've had 102,000 come
okay.
in. So we're
So
actually
it's not a minus.
ahead. And that's kind of an unusual situation there that we're trying to deal with our bank with. Our two banks kind of give us different stories. There's some loans that have been fully repaid, but the bank is still taking payments from us, and they put it in a bank account that we then earn interest on. But if the loan is fully paid, they shouldn't be taking that money at all. So we're working with them to try and get that corrected and get the additional funds they're holding back to us.
And
Perfect.
Councillor Mayor?
Perfect, yep.
All right.
That makes sense.
And Betty, just to circle back, I know I made the comment about the revenues from the city, you know, how we had the overpayment thing happen, we're into the repay. Like, so, do we have it on our radar, you know, your staff, that we're alert to that going forward, that the, you know, the advances kind of make sense in terms of that we don't get caught in that again, I guess, is what I'm hoping is we're on guard for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are watching that. And as far as the overpayment that did happen, the repayment of that started on April 1st. So each month now for the next 24 months, starting in April, they withhold 1/24 of that. And so that's all been carefully monitored, yes.
Yeah, and well, yeah, I guess my question was, so like going forward, that we're, again, you know, what we're getting kind of makes sense, I guess, and that we don't get caught in it again. Thank you. All right, introduction, new business, 7, nothing to ask, okay. 8, adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Mayor Brown, seconded by Councillor Drung, thanks.